All right, breaking news. This is not even on mainstream media yet, but it appears a bunch of pro-Palestine protesters have broken into a Democratic after party in Harlem following Kamala Harris's campaign. This is from Raw News Alerts, and a bunch of people are talking about it on X. It's not even hitting mainstream media yet, but here, check this out. Ready? And I mean, this is really poetic justice. So again, currently, numerous pro-Palestine protesters have stormed Democratic after-party an event in Harlem, Manhattan, following Kamala Harris's campaign. Protesters began setting off smoke bombs, causing chaos at the restaurant hosting the event. The New York Police Department has made several arrests, and clashes between protesters and law enforcement are ongoing. The situation remains tense as authorities work to restore order and clear the area. So let's see some video from this.
How dare you!
You get the point. So, question that arises from this, for me at least, I don't know, maybe call me crazy, but same thing that's happening in the UK. Why is it that anytime somebody that's a Republican says something on social media, they're labeled as a domestic terrorist, but people who happen to be aligned with what Democrats are thinking, they could even attack Democrats, and the mainstream media doesn't label them anything. So I must ask, as I always say rhetorically, because I know the answer to this, but something you should be asking yourselves, why? Why is it that one group of people, so much as a peep, they're labeled as domestic terrorists, and another group of people can violently attack police and politicians? They entered the Capitol last week, same way that people did on January 6th, or not last week, but when Netanyahu was in DC, the protesters literally broke into the Capitol building after vandalizing the statues outside. So what's the agenda here? This is the whole mass migration, degrade national pride, sovereignty culture, because it's a key piece of this new world order, one world government. Sound like a broken record, but I'm trying to be as repetitive as the mainstream media is, because unfortunately that's the mechanism that they use to do their version of brainwashing. I'm trying to do honest brainwashing and tell you the truth of what's really going on over and over and over again until everybody starts saying it, because that's what we need. We need millions of people to be reciting this and echoing this and understanding why this is happening. Because if you try to look at it logically without understanding that piece, then you're going to be confused, because it doesn't make sense if you're thinking about things logically and innocently. They're trying to cause chaos. They're trying to degrade our culture, eliminate it, water it down, so that we have such bad levels of chaos that we go begging to the government, oh, make stricter rules, save us, save the day, and then they'll swoop in and we'll never have the same amount of freedom again. So if that sounds like something you wouldn't like, look at the concept of nationalism versus globalism instead of Democrat versus Republican. So I'm going to show you a few articles right here of the narratives that they're trying to spin around Trump right now. So first one, Donald Trump struggling to get past his anger after terrible VP pick, mulling over firing very talented ... Let's take a look at who they're saying that he's looking at firing. Donald Trump has been attempting all the measures to stay in the spotlight amidst his ongoing election campaign for the White House battle. In less than a month, the former president has appeared in two crucial interviews, one with internet sensation Aiden Ross and the other one with Elon Musk, who support Trump, deemed as very special for Trump. Conversations with Ross and Musk were important in order to draw voters' attention, especially among Gen Z. Despite all his efforts, the GOP presidential candidate is said to be upset with his vice presidential pick, according to the Daily Mail report. Insiders have discussed that Trump is lighting up his campaign team as he bunkers down at Mar-a-Lago following his terrible, quote, terrible move to pick J.D. Vance's running mate. This from the Hinduism Times, by the way. Sources close to him reveal that Trump's alleged breakdown as he continues to lose ground in the polls in the wake of President Joe Biden's withdrawal from the race, Kamala Harris' ascension to the top of the Democratic ticket. For Trump supporters, spokesperson Sarah Matthews told NBC, I think that he feels this election is slipping away from him, and that's where you're beginning to see him spiral, end quote. For GOP leaders and top donors have expressed concerns about Trump's haphazard approach over his harsh personal assaults on Harris rather than focusing on important policy matters like the border, abortion, inflation, and crime. All right, so that's one. Now, another article is going to talk about who he's considering firing, which I agree with this one, actually, that he should fire his campaign manager. So ready? Check this out. From The Sun, raging Donald Trump is ready to fire top campaign staff as Kamala Harris redefines herself with major policy U-turns. She hasn't even spoken about policy yet. Trump's apparent meltdown has been prompted by a slide in the polls following Harris' recent increase in popularity. You know how much weight I give to those polls? I always think back to how they were saying, those same polls were saying Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance of winning in October of 2016. That's how much significance I give to those polls. Quote, I think that he feels this election slipping away from him. That's where you're beginning to see him spiral, says Sarah Matthews, a former Trump spokesperson. Insiders say Republicans and key donors are concerned about Trump's campaign strategy. All right, so is this overblown? 100% overblown. They're trying to set a narrative. They're overhyping how well Kamala's doing in the polls, and they're trying to diminish Trump's momentum. And I mean, at the end of the day, look at a Trump crowd. It's miles down the street, anywhere he goes. Look at a Kamala crowd. It's possibly AI generated, her crowds. But I will say at the same time, I don't like the way that Trump is campaigning right now with this strategy. I mean, I heard Dave Smith and Tucker speaking about this last night, and they're talking about he's a little bit all over the place. Instead of focusing on one or two key issues, really driving it home, easy, inflation and immigration. We've had 20 million illegal immigrants here. Crime is through the roof, and then prices are through the roof. I saw this video the other day. A guy did this test where he took a Walmart shopping cart online that he had from 2 or 3 years ago, or excuse me, from 4 years ago when Trump was president. It was $125, and now it's over $400 for the same groceries. While they're trying to tell you that inflation has fallen down, they conquered it. So those are real things that people are dealing with every day, not to mention the fact that we're getting magnetically pulled into several different wars right now. So it's very easy for Trump to just talk about the scary, unpleasant, difficult things that are going on instead of, going farther right. I mean, this video the other day where he's talking about giving police immunity. Are you crazy? You just 3x'd the amount of black people who are supporting you, Trump. What are you doing talking about giving police immunity? Police shouldn't have immunity. Some police are terrible. Some police totally abuse their power. So that's a far right position. And speaking of far right, Agenda 25 or whatever it's called. Agenda 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. Total psyop. I think that that's something that they put out there to try to attach Trump to and say, oh, yeah, he wants a federal abortion ban, which he said he doesn't want that, but he is not saying that enough. And with that being probably the biggest issue that people that are in the middle are kind of holding against him, he should be yelling off the mountaintop that he's not going to do a federal abortion ban. I love what he says about what Reagan said, that he said it should be, that he said there's 3 exceptions. I believe it was rape, incest, and health of the mother. And then Clinton also had a pretty good outlook on abortion too. He said it should be safe, legal, and rare. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, I go out, I talk to people on the street, ask them see what the sentiment is, because you don't really have to talk to that many people to see what the sentiment is among a certain demographic. And a lot of people are just really not tuned in with things, not really up to date on what's going on. They don't even know Kamala's record and what she's done. Like, you know, I mean, that's the only boost that that's the only reason that Kamala's gotten a boost, is because she hasn't been as visibly decrepit and, you know, unfit for the job as Biden's been, because people have heard him speak. They know he has dementia. So Kamala's kind of been tucked away, hiding. So just the fact that they don't attribute the dementia thing to her, that's what gave her the boost in the polls. But this should be a slam dunk for Trump. I mean, and not to mention, it's only been 1 month since he was shot. I think the way that he's handled that has been a mistake. I think that he was much too quick to do the whole unity thing, and he's not asking nearly enough questions. I mean, he's went out of his way to praise the Secret Service's fast response, but he hasn't ever insinuated the possibility that people who don't like him that might be in the government might have had something to do with that. I mean, it's truly insane how quickly we moved on past the fact that he got shot in the face. Like, I heard this concept one time of censorship versus information overload, and that's what we have today. We have information overload, and there's literally nothing. Like, no matter how shocking the news is or the event is or the information is, I haven't seen one instance where people continue to think about something unless the media machine is driving the issue. And that's really the power of the left, is that they're very united on messaging. Even though that mainstream media is kind of fallen by the wayside, viewership's cratering, they're still very consistent with their messaging. And that's something that the right has not been able to master yet. I mean, look at all the things that people on the right have gotten fixated on in between Trump getting shot and now. That's not something that we should let go overnight. That's something we need to keep asking questions about. But I think that Trump should probably fire his campaign manager, because, you know, he should have all the momentum in the world right now, and that doesn't seem to be the case. RFK tried to meet with Kamala Harris to discuss a cabinet job. What is going on here? I am so freaking conflicted on this guy. I mean, so many people that I respect, trust their opinion, adore him. You know, whether it's Alex Jones, Tucker, PBD, Joe Rogan, all adore RFK. I adore the Kennedy family. Obviously, anybody who's been assassinated for their political beliefs is fighting the good fight. You know, multiple family members in that situation for him. He says a lot of things that I agree with. But between this and the leaked phone call of Trump, which I thought maybe it was intentional, but this has me thinking otherwise, and then him flip-flopping on several positions during his campaign, very, very conflicted on RFK right now. Let's take a look at what this says here. So, from the Washington Post, independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy sought a meeting last week with Democrat nominee Kamala Harris to discuss the possibility of serving in her administration, perhaps as a cabinet secretary if he throws his support behind her campaign and she wins, according to Kennedy officials. Harris and her advisors have not responded with an offer to meet or shown interest in the proposal, says people familiar with the conversations. The Kennedy outreach made through intermediaries follows as a meeting in Milwaukee last month between Kennedy and Republican nominee Donald Trump to discuss a similar policy role and endorsement that resulted in no agreement. In those discussions, Kennedy spoke about advising Trump in a second term on health and medical issues. The independent candidate and namesake of the most famous American political dynasty is exploring multiple options for the future of the presidential effort, which has seen a decline in national polling since President Joe Biden dropped out of the race. His campaign has produced polling, which it has tried to share with Democrats, that it claims shows both Harris and Trump would get a boost in their public support across 31 states if either candidate announced publicly that Kennedy would have a cabinet role in their administration. Oh, I'm sure he did find polling that said that. You know what they say? There's lies, there's big lies, and then there's statistics at the highest level of lying. You can make a statistic say anything if you measure something a certain way. So at the moment, Kennedy says he's continuing to campaign with the expectation that he will defeat both Trump and Harris, making regular interview appearances, releasing America Strong plan for bipartisan governance, and planning upcoming rallies in states such as Arizona and Nebraska. But he also left open the possibility of bowing out of the race if he finds another way to bring about the change he seeks in the country, his advisors say. From the beginning of his campaign, we were saying people should be talking to each other, Kennedy said Wednesday in an interview, quote, that this is the only way of unifying the country. Kennedy says he hopes Harris reconsiders his offer of a meeting. Quote, I think it is a strategic mistake for them. That's my perspective, end quote. Kennedy said, quote, I think they ought to be looking at every opportunity. I think this is going to be a very close race, end quote. The latest round of outreach follows earlier efforts to convince Democrats that Kennedy would make a better candidate on their ticket than Biden, even after Kennedy left the Democratic nomination to fight to pursue an independent campaign for president last November. His advisors continued to press the case privately that he could replace Biden as the Democrat nominee. Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, the campaign manager and daughter-in-law to the candidate, argued in an April email to Democrats obtained by the Washington Post that Biden could not win the race. Quote, as things are, Biden is going to lose. If Bobby were to drop out, Trump would win by an additional 2 states, end quote. She wrote, quote, if Biden were to drop out, Trump would lose. Only Bobby can win this, end quote. Hey, I mean, I respect being a ride or die. He argued that Democrats had to make sure a president is elected who could handle the responsibility of managing the nuclear arsenal. Quote, I don't want a president who is obsessed with the size of his crowds to be given sacred charge. My bomb is bigger than your bomb is no path to peace. She wrote, all right, enough reading this crap. So, okay, Mrs. Kennedy. Clearly what she doesn't get is that, usual suspects, Kevin Spacey, you have to convince your enemies that you're crazy enough to do the unthinkable. There's an immense power in acting crazy to a degree to scare these dictators, these ruthless dictators around the world. You have to put some degree of fear in them. And you're saying you don't want a president who talks about the size of his bombs, but we're okay, I'm imagining, with a president who most people knew had dementia going into the race last election. And then you're also okay with potentially with a candidate who doesn't have a whole lot of accomplishments under her belt. It's quite the opposite. So, with all that said, I'm as conflicted on RFK as an individual as I've ever been. I like and respect a lot of things about him, but there's been a consistent flow of things that he's done in the past year that I'm not feeling good about. And, let's not rule out the possibility that maybe this was a strategic move that he's working with Trump and they saw some sort of advantage in pretending like he's trying to align with Kamala. Maybe that'll make people who are on the fence associate him with Democrats more. So he's taking more votes from Democrats instead of Republicans. I don't know. I almost feel like there's a degree of both parties trying to separate themselves from him so that they don't get more voters taken away from him for the people who are sitting on the fence. Crazy stuff. I mean, if this was a genuine thing that's not a coordinated strategic attempt to do something here, a big mistake by him. My God, big mistake. Let me know what you think. Love y'all. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.